Hi, my name is Jonathan Fields with Good Life Project. Really excited. My guest today is Mary Kate McDevitt. She's an illustrator and a hand letterer. And if you have no idea what that means, we're going to dive into exactly what it is because it's so cool and I'm becoming increasingly obsessed about it. So cool to be hanging out with you today.
I'm glad to be here.
So you probably don't know this because I actually haven't shared this with you, but I first came upon your work when I was out in San Francisco, and I was stopping by Chronicle Books.
Oh, okay.
And downstairs, there's a bookstore that I didn't want to leave there, and I'm like pulling out all the books, and I see this one book on hand lettering. I'm like, this is so cool. And then eventually I discovered that you did the cover for that book.
Yeah, the little book of hand lettering.
Right, which is just so cool. And then I kind of forgot about it, and I was flipping through, and then you came back onto my radar because I saw that you were doing this really cool online stuff.
Yeah.
So let's explore what you're doing, and then I want to kind of take a step back and explore your journey, because I'm fascinated how somebody becomes a hand letterer. So what is this thing called hand lettering?
So lettering is the art of drawing letters. It's literally like taking letters and drawing them in an illustrative way. So it's something that a lot of people like to use when they need something really custom, something where they either can't find the right typeface or it's hand painted. It goes with something that's hand painted or sign painted or something calligraphy, although that's not really hand lettering either.
Right. I mean, I think what's so cool to me, and I didn't realize this at all, is when I start to look at your work and then look at your portfolio and look at people who are doing this, is that it never occurs to me until I actually see that there's somebody who does hand lettering, that this wasn't just done by like grabbing a font from a computer and somehow modifying it, that this was actually like artfully thought through and hand drawn and hand created. Because I think we've gotten so used to the fact that anytime you see type, I mean, outside of your world, anytime we see type, it's just some font that somebody grabbed and dropped on and dropped the color on or something like that. But it's just this incredible art form that exists in a world that I think if you're not in that world, nobody really knows exists.
Yeah, I think it's something that I kind of think of that too when I'm looking at other people's work that I really admire. And when I started out lettering, it was really simple. And I was like, oh, it's going to take forever to do this like huge thing. And so when you kind of get to know lettering more and how to draw letters correctly, it kind of goes quicker once you have more experience. But it is something that is, I guess, like any art form, it takes a lot of time to like carve out this piece you're working on.
Yeah. So I'm guessing, and tell me if I'm wrong, that when you started your career, that the thing, you didn't basically wake up one morning and say, I'm going to be a hand letterer.
Right.
So how do you take me back in time a little bit? I want to talk more about what you're actually doing, but I'm so fascinated by the path, like where you start from. So bring me back.
Okay, so basically I learned of lettering, I guess, even though then I didn't really know it was in art school. And I was a graphic design major.
Yeah.
And I took a lot of illustration classes as well, because I was always like the really hands-on, a lot of texture and stuff in my design projects. And it was a project I was working on. We had to take a restaurant and like brand it or make up a restaurant completely. So I had done a sketch of a logo, and it was just the sketch, but I had done lettering thinking I was going to find a typeface that matched what I was thinking. And my teacher was like, this is it. Just don't change a thing. And I was like, yeah, but I want to look through fonts and, be like a font geek like everyone else. And he was like, no, just keep going with this. And I made everything ended up being completely drawn with letters. And I did that with other projects. And I just found that it felt more like me because I was really into painting and illustration. And I started incorporating illustration in a lot of my projects. And I did a children's book where it was completely hand lettered instead of using a typeface. And it was kind of then when I was like, okay, this is something that I feel really works for me.
Right.
It's something that I think can kind of set my work apart. And especially because I'm just not good at working with typefaces and that kind of thing. It just never was my style. So when I graduated, I really was thinking I would be an illustrator that kind of snuck type and lettering into my projects. And I got a job working as a designer, and it kind of strayed away for a couple of years, but I ended up coming back to it when I opened up my Etsy shop and started making all these things that included lettering.
So let me ask you, I mean, this is kind of fascinating on a couple different levels. One, you said you went to school for graphic design.
Yeah.
But it sounds like the real thing in you that was illustration. Was that from an earlier age type of thing?
I don't know. I mean, it was
What made you choose graphic design? Because the reason I'm asking, somebody recently, it may have been on one of these shows, actually, I can't remember where it was. He's like, yeah, basically every graphic designer is an illustrator who couldn't make it as an illustrator. So
Right.
And that's not my words, but it's interesting to me. And we've had a conversation with Milton Glaser, when there's this really interesting dynamic between like graphic design and illustration, and people seem to feel really strongly about how they go together, how they don't, and why you would choose one over the other, or whether they're really different.
Well, when I chose graphic design as my major, it was kind of like because I felt like there were jobs out there, and illustration, I only was like, oh, that's children's books only, and I don't know if I'm interested in that.
So it's more like a career, like I think.
Yeah, I think it was kind of more like
make a living.
Yeah, a little bit, only because I don't know. It was just kind of what was on my mind, and I'd always really liked my painting classes, and my painting professor was like hounding me every day to be a painting major, and I was like, I don't know, I'm nervous about it. And I really liked my design classes. I took, like, when you start out, you take a bunch of electives to find your major, and I really liked design because of like, you take a project and you think about it, and it's like you can really like make something rather than like make a painting, and it's like whatever you want. And then the illustration courses at Tyler School of Art are pretty limited at the time. So it wasn't until I took my design class that I was like, oh, I should take illustration and kind of get to know that side. It'll only help my design, and that's what I was focused on. Like when I was a sophomore and junior, was being a designer. It wasn't until the end of my junior year where I was like, no, illustration.
Right. I mean, it seems, and tell me, because I have no art education, which is, I do all my own design work. Like I work with Adobe Creative Cloud and everything for years, but I'm a complete hack at everything. I'm the only one who can get what's in my head, so I just taught myself how to use the tools. But I've like studied a fair amount of sort of design philosophy and approaches and stuff, and like design thinking and stuff like that. And it seems like a lot of design also is sort of like, we have a problem or challenge, and here's a set of resources, and here's a set of constraints, which it seems to me would be just a good experience and skill set to have, like no matter what you do in the art world.
I agree. I always thought about that with my friends who are fine art majors, and they were like having trouble coming up with an idea for a project, and I was like, well, you need like boundaries or constraints or something to come up with a good idea. And I don't know if they ever really listened to me, but I think
it's so counterintuitive to so many people.
Yeah.
But the reality is, like, when you have those constraints, I mean, there's actually research that shows that you become more creative.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But I think we're just not designed to think that, especially I think people who maybe are drawn to the arts tend to think expansively, like I can't be constrained, like it's going to limit my expression. When in fact, it's like if you tell yourself, okay, I have to paint something, on the face of a quarter.
Yeah.
Like that constraint does all sorts of things in the way that you create and the way you think and the way you sort of like trying to figure out what you're going to do. So you're going through your formal education. I'm curious too, because we've had this conversation recently with somebody. What are your thoughts on the role of formal art education these days?
I just think it's really a personal decision. I think it's different for everybody. For me, going to art school was really important. I really needed those kind of relationships with my teachers, my friends, whether they're fine art or graphic design. It was really important for me to kind of have this community to help find like what, we're all doing for design and stuff. So I couldn't imagine just being alone, learning it on my own. It would just seem scary. But some people, that's totally how they prefer to work. So, yeah. And I think especially now, there's all these other kind of venues for learning online and on your own. Right. And so it's probably, if you think about, your financial situation, like, okay, do I either spend thousands and thousands of dollars and 4 years of my life, or narrow it down the time and the money and just kind of learning it on my own?
Yeah, and in fact, you become a teacher now.
Yeah. And
so you teach online for, like a really quality experience for a fraction of what it would cost to take the course.
A fraction is
like a really, really, really small fraction.
The tiniest fraction possible.
But it's quality, and you can reach vastly more people that way also. It's amazing just to see how, and it's not just art education, but how education in general is evolving and being democratized to such a large extent. I think there's some good and there's some bad, but on the whole, I think the good really outweighs the bad these days.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it'd be interesting, because there is an online community now. It's not like you miss that not going to art school, because I know through Skillshare, there's a lot of people who actually become real life friends or real life coworkers. Right. I know a lot of that happens, and I kind of have a relationship with some of my students, just like a back and forth, and how they're growing in their project and everything. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting alternative world. And I guess things that I wasn't even aware of, that we were speaking with Noah Bradley recently, and he was saying that there are now these sort of like I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it, but like atelier programs, and where you can essentially get studio time with senior artists and teachers for a really affordable amount of money.
Yeah.
So it's so cool to see how the possibilities of learning whatever craft calls you are really just expanding so much and becoming so much more accessible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you come out of school and you do the graphic design thing, but not so much because it's your thing, but because...
So it was kind of right when I graduated. I sent out a bunch of postcards to do illustration. I had these postcards where it was like a weird image. I drew like really weird people, but like had lettering included. So I was hoping I'd send those out and get some lettering jobs. And I ended up getting a job to do 4 covers for a travel magazine, and I was like, oh my god, like a real job, like right away. I'm totally going to be an illustrator. And it's like a couple weeks later, I get a request to come in to interview for this design studio that I had heard of, and like I've seen in annuals and stuff. So I was like, okay, I'll try this out too. I'm not gonna close any doors as soon as I graduate. So I do the interview and I ended up getting the job, and I was like, okay, I'm young, I'm allowed to do these kind of new things, and I wasn't not interested in doing design. I just wasn't sure if it was exactly what I wanted to do. And in this design studio, I had worked on some projects that allowed me to do kind of my own thing, but most of it was very like catalogs and some small branding projects. And
when you were working that gig, were you still doing your other work outside of work?
A little bit.
Yeah.
I couldn't do any big projects because I had signed a non-compete, but I just had an Etsy shop.
Right.
Where because I would go home and my hands are dying to make stuff because in art school, I was constantly making stuff, and that just drives me nuts. So I started this Etsy shop where, and my boyfriend's a screen printer, so I was making posters, he was printing them, and I was hand painting these chalkboards called mini goals chalkboards, where I had these fun little phrases like, yesterday I was supposed to do, and then at the bottom it says, but hey, carpe diem. And like those were doing pretty well. And it got to a point where my Etsy shop was actually doing pretty well, and I'd started getting some interest in freelance work, but I couldn't really.
Because you had your main gig.
Because I had the main gig and the non-compete, and but one of the emails that I got that really got my interest was an email from Chronicle Books to do the Mini Goals notepad. And that was taking my Mini Goals chalkboards ideas and turning it into stationery. And I told my boss about the job, and he was like, that kind of interferes with the non-compete form. So I was like, okay, I guess now's as good a time as any to switch to freelance.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it's so interesting because like people very often make the jump into doing their own thing. One of two ways. They just they go cold turkey. You know, like they stop the old thing, and then they hope and pray that they have enough, like money in the bank or whatever it is to get them to ramp up with the new thing, or they build that next thing in their free time, like until it slowly gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you hit this. And it's I've heard this story so many different times, which is your story. You're like, you got your main thing, it's paying your rent. Maybe it's awful, but maybe it's okay. Maybe it's pretty decent, right? But it gives you the time to come home and do the real fun, cool stuff, that passion project. And then that passion project starts to build and build and build. And it almost always gets to a point where you hit a moment in time where you've got, a decision has to be made. And you got to weigh, do I walk away from that main thing or not? Because you can see where your thing is headed and where it could go if you were doing it full time, and there's no way it's going to go there if you don't do that. Was that a hard moment for you, or were you just at that point, no, it's easy segue?
Pretty easy, because I had just gotten it just had to happen. I was getting stir crazy. So it was kind of a perfect moment. And while I kind of, a couple very little clients, I basically had the Chronicle Books, and I was like, well, that's big enough, rather than 10 small clients. And so I was like, I think I'll do okay. And basically, a month later, packed my bags, moved to Portland, which is freelancers, artists,
right,
heaven,
Well, what's the Portlandia line where young people go to retire?
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, okay.
I love Portland. It's one of my favorite places, actually.
Yeah, it's such a great city. It was, I think I moved there a year before Portlandia came out. So I think I was the teensiest ahead of the curve, I guess. But Portland was so perfect. It's an easy city to love. Yeah. It's super affordable. And just right away, the artist community was welcoming, and even very few people really knew my work that well. It was, and it was really helpful. It was such a perfect time in my career to move there and kind of experiment. How important is it in your experience when you're trying to build a career as an artist to have that community that supports you? I think it's really helpful. I mean, you can have an online support community, and a lot of people do, and a lot of people have big ones and live, in the Midwest where there's maybe not as many people. Yeah, I mean, I guess geography may just not allow it. Yeah. Right, exactly. So if you do live in a smaller town but are making great work and have a big following online, then that's great. I think I like going to different openings and meeting people. I don't do a whole lot of it. I'm not a crazy social person, but it's important to. It just energizes me. It's seeing other people's work and
Right.
meeting new people, it's helpful for me to kind of get like, okay, like I need constant motivation or
Right.
something.
Which is, I mean, it kind of brings up this whole other question of mine. So when I look at your work and almost any, and for some reason it's so weird, it doesn't really come up when I look at all sorts of other types of illustrations. This comes up for me with hand lettering for some reason all the time, which is I'm like, where did you get the idea to draw the letter that way?
Right.
You know, it's like, I mean, you're like Jessica Hish, you know, there's people, you just, in the blink, you know their style. Like,
Yeah.
but there are so many, like, and yeah, when you first started, you're like, well, there's like 5 ways to draw an A.
Yeah.
And then when you start to look around, you're like, oh no, there are like 5 million ways to draw an A, and there are 5 million that haven't been done yet. And each one of them actually, and it's the bizarre thing to say, probably to somebody who's never really gone down this rabbit hole, but like, you'll experience the A differently as just a viewer. And you'll experience like whatever the word is or the message or the book cover or the poster differently based on the way that the letters are drawn, like completely separate from what the actual word is, you know, or
Right.
words are.
I mean, so when I started out, it was always pretty simple, like block letter or something, and not super stylized. And it wasn't until I kind of just got obsessed with it, because that's what you have to do when you find out your calling or whatever. So I was looking at a ton of historical reference and just different packaging from the early 1900s, and because that's where I draw a lot of inspiration. A lot of letterers who work in like a more, I don't know, like a fan, like, you know, really lots of fun things going on, because they just the quality of lettering then was so beautiful, because that's how they created everything
Right.
for their.
That's what you had to do.
So, like, they take, you know, a little vintage little tin. They have to come up with a design for it. There's no typefaces to use, so everything was hand lettered, and it was a very specialized practice. And I don't know, there's a lot of inspiration from there. So you can kind of pull from there, and then pull from like different decades that make sense for your inspiration for the piece. So if you're doing a book cover, that's like somewhere drawing
Like
from
some
like
period piece or.
right, you've like deco or something. There's certain things like tons of inspiration, like crazy borders you can incorporate in your lettering, and just like things like that. So it's when you think about, it's like, okay, you have your basic A, but I want to make it really big and fancy. You think of what your project is, and I like to do a lot of research about it, kind of what makes sense stylistically, and I'll kind of just write lists of words that kind of come to mind when I think about my project, and I'll do research on that, and I'll find maybe it's not even lettering, but it's like an old photo or an old illustration I found where like little branch details were used, and I'll pick up on something like that, and maybe I'll use something similar to that, really stylized in the letter, where it's like branches and little leaves, and not completely representational, but interpreted in a way that could make the letter really interesting. So it's kind of like pulling from your inspiration, but like trying to be really clever about it, like thinking, I want to incorporate bubbles, but I don't want it to be the obvious like bubble lettering. So you think about how you can incorporate the ornamentation into the letter that incorporates these bubbles, and how it will make sense coming back to your concept.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting. So in the book world, there are a large amount of people who say, you know, like, you need to understand that the medium is not the message. And when I look at things like what you do, and I think a lot of design in general, and I've always said, no, that's actually wrong. I mean, to me, so yeah, and you could say that the medium in this case would be hand lettering to deliver the message, but they're really inseparable. Like, to me, that, you know, whether it's the design that wraps around it or the way that you actually illustrate and draw the letters, I have to believe that actually has a pretty strong influence on the way that people experience the actual language.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, going back to when I was taking illustration in college and I was doing lettering in my projects, my illustration teacher was against it because he was like, you shouldn't have to spell out your concept. You should let the image speak for itself, which I think is kind of what we're talking about with the book covers. But I'm like, yeah, but it's only kind of helping. I'm not spelling out like this is what you're looking at right now. It's the whole message together, kind of incorporating lettering and illustration in a way that only makes the message more beautiful. And so I think when you have lettering, and especially when there's a project that calls for lettering, it's meant to be super illustrative. Well, not super illustrative, but right. Illustrative enough that it's like, it needs to be, we have this idea, and only lettering will work for it because the typeface isn't going to work. And like, why not include those extra details that kind of make sense with the concept and just kind of take it to the next level, that conceptually and visually.
Yeah. It's funny, as you're speaking, there's like a famous story about Hemingway and his 6-word story. Mm-hmm. Nobody really knows if it's true or not, but have you ever heard it?
I don't think so.
So apparently Hemingway was sitting around one night with a couple of friends, and there was a challenge issue, like to tell a complete story in 6 words. Mm-hmm. And he said, I'll take that challenge. And everybody put money down. And he writes down on a piece of paper, like 6 words, and the words were, for sale, baby shoes, never worn. Right? And for some reason, while you're saying that, like, those words popped into my head, and I was like, if you hand-lettered those 6 words, the mm-hmm. way that you chose to hand-letter them could profoundly change the way somebody experienced that 6-word story.
Exactly, yeah.
You know, and you can't convince me that otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Now I really want to letter that. I might just.
You have to look it up to make sure I got it right. But it's like something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we move through life so often not realizing that I'm also obsessed with language as a writer. Mm-hmm. So I'm so obsessed with just the craft and how you phrase things and how people experience a turn of a phrase or like the imagery or the story that it tells. And to think that you could layer on top of that the way that people see the words, and right. that creates this whole other context for experience and emotion and story. That's one of the reasons why I'm so fascinated, mm-hmm. because I'm like, okay, I want to learn how to hand letter now. Yeah. So I'm like, it's clearly a whole other art form that would take years to sort of dive into, but it's a fascination of mine. Mm-hmm. So where are you focusing now? So you sort of start to build a career, and there's an increasing demand mm-hmm. for not just the illustration, you move into graphic design, but for the lettering part of what you're doing. So you work on your own projects, but also there's more stuff beyond that happening. Yeah.
I mean, most of what I do is all client work.
Right.
I focus very little time on my Etsy shop anymore. It's still up, and my boyfriend runs it, but I don't really make too many. I don't have time for too many personal projects that I can do for that. But I do a lot of editorial stuff, book covers, ad campaign.
Right. So here's my question with all of that. I'll ask you a question. You can choose to answer it or not. Do you do that because does it make you feel as good as when you're doing your own stuff? This is like a constant thing with artists that I know. Mm-hmm. Or is it like, you do certain work because it pays the rent, you do certain work because it lights you up, or are you just cool with all of it?
I like all of it. I mean, when I get an email and I'm looking what the brief is about, I like, if I'm really into the project, I'll like immediately kind of be like, oh, I can definitely kind of see how this could go out. And that is really exciting to me. Just like the variety of projects I get and kind of working with different styles and stuff, because I'm not always brought on they're not always like, we like this one project. Can you kind of do it again for us in this instance? Every now and then I get kind of projects like that, which is fine. But it's always, I really like interpreting people's ideas for whatever it is they want me to letter, whether it's a book cover or magazine cover or anything. So it's the variety that is really interesting to me. And if I do feel like, okay, I have this idea that I had a while ago and I didn't get to use it on a project, or I just need to get it on paper, I'll just kind of take a evening, a few hours, and just make something new.
Right.
And that is helpful, like if I want to, especially if I want to do something really different. I like working on those projects too, but it's really just anything. I don't know. I just love, I love lettering. It's pretty clear, I guess, but any project for me is good.
Do you find that, so this was an interesting conversation I had with Milton Glaser. We're talking about styles, or very often you get known for a style.
Right.
Right. And with Milton, we were talking about the fact that he actually hates sort of saying this is, this my style, something like that. And in his mind, he wants to keep taking, he's like, people very often want to hire you because they know that your work is going to be like this body of work. It's going to be similar to it, and that's what they want. But at the same time, as an artist, he wants to keep completely learning and growing, doing completely new stuff. So you have clients that come in and want to hire you to do stuff which is similar to what you've done in the past, but you want to keep creating and reinventing yourself. Do you find that that's something that you explore?
I guess completely different styles, probably not. That's probably not something I do so much. I guess sometimes I'll think I'm doing something totally different, and then it kind of gets colored in my kind of color palette, and it's like, oh, this isn't that different from what I usually do. It's I'll try and it's really, I don't know, blocky and abstract or something, and it's oh, nah, it's pretty much what I usually do. So I think, I don't know, if someone, I definitely wouldn't get brought on to do a project where it's completely out of my comfort zone. I'd probably turn it down because it's clearly you're trying to hire someone else.
Right, yeah.
And it's you must have got my email mixed up with someone. Or I'm that would be it. I probably wouldn't take it on and be okay, yeah, let's try it. Because that would be
So do you ever get concerned that when you start that project, I'm going to do something different and cool, and then you realize this is pretty similar to my body of work. Do you ever explore the question whether the reason that it's similar is because that's what you know best and it comes easiest to you, and whether you should be
I guess so.
beyond
it's
that? Not that it's right or wrong. I'm just curious whether it kind of pops into your mind as you notice that.
Because if it is a project where I'm oh, this is gonna be totally crazy, and it's oh, no, it's not. I'm okay, next time I attempt this, I need to probably working in a different medium. I work a lot, I draw everything by hand, but it's all colored on the computer, and I'm I should go back to when I used to do all hand-painted lettering and try that, because that will definitely have a completely different feel and take me out of my comfort zone just a little bit. Just a little bit more daring, probably. So that's something I want to explore more. I used to do, I like doing some projects with one shot, which is sign painting paint, and trying more things like that. That's something I kind of do just on objects around my studio space, just for fun.
Does one shot dry really fast or something?
It dries
one
really
shot
It's one shot because it's, you have to get a special kind of, what's it called? A agent, to clean it off because it's oil based.
Got it.
So you kind of have one shot to do it, and that's how sign painters. That's the saying. Sign painters do it in one shot because it's all in one stroke.
Yeah, instead of printing out the vinyl now and just pressing it on.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is where it's all gone.
Yeah.
When you're in the studio and you're grooving on something, is it when you work and when you're doing your work, what is it that keeps you wanting to do more?
I guess, I don't know, just wanting the new assignment, just like the adventure of like, oh, what's next? That's kind of what keeps me going, and just constantly exploring. And I can't imagine doing anything else with my time. So that's definitely helpful to kind of keep going in that sense.
It's almost like it's a thing you can't not do at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much like a person who's in the studio every day, almost all day. Even when I maybe have a lighter schedule, it's like I could certainly be doing something else or sketching something out. And so I think it's just like this obsessive nature at this point where I don't feel like I have another option not to go to the studio and try something out.
But a good obsession.
A good obsession, I think so.
Right. So you've also, we talked about it a little bit earlier, you're now moving past, I don't want to say just creating because it's creating, but into teaching.
Yeah.
And so you have a class on Skillshare, an online class, which is basically like the fundamentals of hand lettering. Was that something that just came to you? Did you seek it out? And what do you like? Are you finding that you really enjoy teaching?
I really enjoy it. They came to me, I want to say like a year ago, and I was like, yeah, I'd be interested. And I just felt so nervous or something. Like, I don't know if I'm really the person to teach people about lettering. Who knows? And after talking with one of the people at Skillshare, they were like, well, we're just looking for different perspectives, and because there's already a bunch of classes on lettering on Skillshare, right. So it's like, well, how's mine going to be different? And I think there's a lot of different processes and different perspectives from teachers, even if you work similarly. So when they emailed me like a third time and were like, do you want to? And I was like, okay, yeah, let's do it. And for some reason, I just couldn't think about doing one whole project in class because, I don't know, I was just nervous about it. So I was like, okay, well, let's do 2 classes. So my next class is starting in like a week, and this is the first kind of part of the class. So the first class is the first steps of hand lettering, and we basically just cover how to like really draw out your lettering, because that's what I think a lot of people who are starting out lettering, they jump into the computer too quickly,
right?
And they focus just on color and texture. And I noticed some people posting in their projects like, all right, I'm thinking this is going to be, these colors, and it's like, you don't even have thumbnails. Like, slow down. Like, it's okay to think about color, but it's like, really getting your sketch is so important. And we kind of talked about this a while ago. Like when you look at a hand-lettered piece and you're looking at all the details and you're just like, how was this all done? And it's the most important part is just that initial sketching stage where you're getting it all out on paper just with pencil. So, and erasing, getting a new piece, tracing, redoing it, redrawing it. I think I say redraw it like a bunch of times in my class. Like, don't be afraid to trace, redraw it, trace over it, refine, because that's what it's about. Otherwise, your letters are going to look off or wonky, because it's really like learning something, especially in a class that's just one class, like, oh, I'm going to learn the basics of lettering in one class. So it's like getting like the idea of repetition in their mind early on. Like, you have to keep redrawing. That's when it's going to come together.
And I think also one of the things that jumped out at me, like I said, one of the fascinations to look at at lettering, like, where did those ideas come from? It's the idea of, and I guess you talk about this also a bit in that class, of spending some time on your references.
Yes.
And I know as a writer, I don't actually believe in writer's block. I'm one of those writers who doesn't believe in writer's block. I believe in research block. You know, so to me, I always know that if I'm having trouble putting words on a page or, you know, like digits on a screen these days, it's not because I don't know what to say. It's because I haven't done my research.
Exactly, yeah.
Like, I don't have the data points in my head needed to be able to do the pattern recognition for it to, like, come out. So I always know, like, I'm not going to solve the problem by sitting in front of the screen and just typing.
Right.
I'm going to solve the problem by stepping back and going and doing more research and thinking about different things. And then, like, once I have that, and I always know, then it's like I can't run back to my MacBook Pro fast enough because it just starts to pour out. You know, so it's interesting, and it would seem to me, again, I haven't actually done the process, though I will soon, that's got to be a huge thing also. Like, once you really get a lot of, like, those references and that data, like, it starts to gel a lot more quickly.
Yeah. Like, I tell my students to do the research, make a mood board of some sort, and write lists, like what I kind of do, just like any words that kind of come up, whether they're really descriptive or not, just something that kind of gets you thinking further than just like what the quote is or what the phrase is. So you're thinking, like mine was about knitting, and it's just like, okay, well, how can we think just more than knitting? Like what that style means and everything like that. So breaking up the class like this, it also, I think it allows you to take more time like that, because it's like, well, in this class, we're only getting to the drawing. We're not even going to get on the computer. So why not? Like, now I feel more comfortable not just like breezing over that step, because then we can work with color faster. So it's like taking more time with the research phase and the sketching, and just like, it was really about like, I just wanted everyone to slow down, like, to just
give yourself a break, take some time, really
take time, because I mean, there was a little bit of a deadline, because I have a challenge where I'm choosing 3 projects to screen print, and I'm choosing them tomorrow, and I don't even know. They're all really great, and but like, you have all this time to work on this one project, make it, you know, spend a lot of time on it, because you don't have it's not a real deadline, you're not working with a client, so.
Yeah. No, I love that. So, when you think about where you're going now, like, you're doing a lot more client work, a lot less project work, teaching or creating courses, stuff like that. Is your style more like, this is just going to evolve the way it's meant to evolve, or are you thinking, okay, this is what I'm going to build, like, this is what I'm planning, this is what I want to map out, and these are like specific goals I'm going to?
It just kind of goes along with however, I'm not good at like putting like landmarks or that's not really the term, milestones in my process and how my work evolves. Like, I just want to, like, I try not to let my client work just go along. I'm not like blindly, you know, just drawing whatever I think comes to mind. Like, I do take time and think about how I can use different styles, and not like completely different styles, but just like a little bit where it's like different decorative elements and ornamentation that really bring the piece together that I might not have used before. And that kind of will play into my next project and how, you know, it kind of comes together in a way. So I think I just kind of let my work evolve naturally.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always curious when you think, because I bounce violently between planning, like the next year, and then just saying, you know, what's really important to me is I wake up in the morning and that I spend the day with people that I love to be around, and that I do work that fills me up and in some way I feel is meaningful.
Yeah.
Beyond me. And I think I don't know whether it's a career thing or an age thing. I think I still have so many plans, and there's still so much I want to do in my body of work. But at the same time, I kind of increasingly feel that if I dial it back to today, if I just, like I said, if I wake up, you know, and I take care of myself and I take care of my relationships and I have a good day doing the work that I love with people that I love and offering meaning, that's going to get me faster to that long-term vision if I really have it, than any sort of like deliberate plan that says, here's the outcome, let me reverse engineer the steps.
Right, yeah.
Because I think, and it's funny, I just wrote about this recently on my blog, I'm not sure when this episode will air, but exploring the idea of how do I want to feel on any given day, which is something Danielle Laporte sort of like dropped into my head. And this two words dropped from the sky literally just a few days ago, which is lit up. I want to feel lit up, you know, and I'm like, if I can do things that just allow me to feel that way as often as possible, then there's something intuitively in me that says, I'll have a good time. I'll get to where I need to go, and people around me will experience me differently and support whatever that place that I want to move to is.
I think that makes much more sense
Yeah.
to me too. Just
You kind of have to take it on faith to a certain extent.
Yeah, but that'll work out.
Yeah, that's life. Anyway, which is a good segue, actually. So the name of this project is the Good Life Project. So when I offer that term out to you, to live a good life, what does that mean to you? What comes up?
I think a good life is just kind of taking on opportunities and being able to embrace them and being able to achieve them and stuff. And I don't know, like right now I've been obsessively looking at cabins. So you say a good life, I'm like, probably moving to my cabin and just working in the woods and lettering all day. And then on the weekends or on the weekdays, come back to the city and do everything else. I don't know.
But how cool is that your good life there is going out and doing like your job?
Yeah. Oh, I know.
You know, like that's your play.
Yeah.
And that's an amazing place to be.
Doing lettering every day and being able to do that is just amazing. Sometimes I get tweets from people who are like, I can't believe lettering is like a real job. I can't believe this person gets to do this. And I'm like, you're right, stranger. Thank you for pointing that out to me. Because it is like, you can so easily be like, oh, client was, and oh, deadline, and oh, it's like 3 a.m. But it's like, you know, you're up till 3 a.m. doing something you love.
Right.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I totally agree. So enjoyed the conversation and enjoyed learning more about your journey, and I can't wait to dive into your Skillshare class, actually.
Yeah, get on that.
I know, I'm going to. She's like, come on, I want to see your project. So my guest today has been Mary Kate McDevitt. I'm Jonathan Fields, signing off for Good Life Project.